Now, the longest-running program in the history of 77 WABC, Religion on the Line, with Rabbi Joseph Potasnik and Deacon Kevin McCormick.
Welcome back, Religion Online. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And for the deacon, Alan Abramson.
I have to say what a tribute this is to Assemblyman Brian Curran of the 21st Assembly District. The Deacon McCormick, even in his sixth state, feeling as he does, said, I want to be on when the Assemblyman is on. So Assemblyman, just make sure that his driveway, the area in front of his house is always plowed carefully.
I will certainly do so. Good morning, Rabbi, and good morning, Alan. You're doing a fantastic job for the deacon in his place.
And he's on the air.
The deacon is here, and the reason he's on is because I look at Assemblyman Brian Curran, and I see a guy who has dedicated his life to public service. He's been elected twice on the conservative, Republican, independent, and tax revolt lines in 10 and 12. He's up for again in 14. And he's a guy who is not afraid to be a Catholic and to be a statesman. And that's why on my sick bed I am making sure I spend a little time with my assemblyman.
Well, Deacon, thank you so much. And I really do appreciate you guys inviting me on today. And I hope you're feeling better. As you may know, my father came straight over from Ireland, and he always had a special remedy for when you weren't feeling good. It was the old Irish hot toddy. So,
well, as a matter of fact, my lad, that's been sustaining me from each night tonight.
Even when he's not sick, yeah.
But I don't drive. I don't drive.
Yes, I was just going to
say,
nobody
by the way, there are so many
drives.
remedies that people have for cold. I think we compile a list of thousands of remedies, and hopefully one of them works. Talk about legislation that you're proposing, Assemblyman Curran.
There's a piece of legislation. It's called the Education Investment Tax Credit Act, and it's sort of a new piece of legislation that came out last year. And let me first give credit to the main bill sponsor. It is Assemblyman Michael Cusick out of Staten Island, and also Senator Golden from Staten Island as well, who are the two people who actually drafted the bill and introduced it in both the Assembly and in the Senate. And if I can, they've done such a great job in not only introducing the bill, but also advancing it as well. Last year, the bill passed the Senate, the state Senate, and in the Assembly, we have about 103 bill sponsors. And what's important out of that 103 sponsors is that 71 of those sponsors are Democrats, which it means it's a real bipartisan bill, and it speaks really well to the future of the bill and its passage, hopefully, in the near future.
Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
No, and for anybody that knows, with regards to Albany, the state assembly actually is made up of 150 seats, and overwhelmingly, the majority of those seats are held by Democrats. So the more Democratic sponsors you have on a bill, the better it is for the passage of that bill in the future.
This education investment tax credit gives people the ability to donate to schools, public and private, for things like school supply, classroom supplies, projects, donation of art, music, and sports, as well as scholarships. And again, it's for public and private, and could be up to about $350 million that could go into classrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically what it does is the legislation allows the Department of Taxation and Finance to establish a structure where either individuals or businesses can make a charitable donation to either public schools, K through 12, pre-kindergarten programs, non-for-profit organizations that provide programs for public schools, and non-for-profit organizations that provide scholarships to public and non-public schools. Now, when an individual actually gives a donation, he or she will receive a tax credit. It's a dollar for dollar up to 75% of their overall tax liability off their state income tax. And for a business that gives a donation, they'll receive a dollar for dollar tax credit up to 75% off their corporate franchise tax. Now, the bill actually calls for $250 million in 2014 and $300 million each calendar year after that to be set aside for this investment act. So, it really is a way to benefit everyone in the whole educational system.
Let me ask you, Assemblyman Curran.
Sure.
I can think of people who are saying, I would give, I just don't trust the government with my money.
Absolutely.
I'm going to give money. Money is fungible. How can I be assured that my money is going to be used for what I give it for, and that other monies are not going to be diverted? because of this.
Well, that's the beauty of this bill, and that actually gets to some of the opposition as well. The beauty of this bill is that it's not the government allocating monies to any particular school or any particular program. It is an individual or business looking at a qualified list of people or schools that they can donate to, and they making the decision of where they want to give their donations. It's not the government actually telling them where they're going to send their money, and that's actually gets to the constitutionality of the bill that I'm sure we're going to talk about. But what's really important about this legislation, it gets funds into the educational system that really wouldn't be there if it was not for the government offering these tax credits. And these, charitable donations is a great way to get funds into education and doing it at a way where it's not on the backs of the taxpayers. Which out here in Nassau County, and I know Deacon McCormick knows that the majority of school districts are funded through property taxes. And here in Nassau County, that burden is getting ever increasingly heavy on the property owners. So this is just another way to alleviate some of that pressure and get money into the school districts to help fund things like the Deacon just said, arts, music, athletics, which they might be having trouble doing right now because of budgetary cuts. And even more important, this is probably the most important, it is for me, is that this bill provides a real opportunity, and I do mean a real opportunity for kids who find themselves in struggling or failing school districts to finally have an opportunity to go and get an education outside that school district at either another public or non-public school, to have a brighter future by getting a good education, which they've been deprived through a failing school district. And I think that's what the most important part of this bill is.
Assemblyman, this is Alan Abramson.
Hello, Alan.
It sounds like a very intriguing idea. I'm curious, how does this differ from the current situation where if people wanted to make a charitable donation to a school, public or private, wouldn't they be receiving some sort of tax deduction for their charitable donation now? Yeah,
there is a difference because right now there's tax deduction as opposed to a tax credit. This actually calls for a tax credit, which is $1 for $1 up to 75% of your overall liability. It's not a deduction where it would only be a partial, and I think that's important. Also, like I said before, that this bill does not call for a specific. It doesn't tell the donor where your money has to go. This bill leaves it up to the donor where they want to send their money.
And just one other question, I guess, because you raised the constitutional issue. Is there any equal protection concerns here? Because what happens if, schools in a particularly wealthy district, can ask people living in that district to make these kinds of donations? Their donors are getting tax credits, but schools in districts that aren't as wealthy or poor districts don't have that donor base to draw from.
Well, you know what? Yeah, that's a very legitimate concern. The first and foremost the problem that is raised with this legislation is that, if I could just step back, is that it violates the Establishment Clause, and that
that was the next question.
Yeah, the public money should never go to non-public or religious schools. And right now we have currently 10 states that have a similar tax credit law on their books that is being proposed here. And out of those 10 states, 3 of them, Arizona, Illinois, and Minnesota, their programs have been challenged in court, and they have been upheld. And the reason why they've been upheld is because different from the school voucher programs, where the government is actually taking in tax dollars and allocating those tax dollars to families to send their kids to, private or non-public schools. This is different. The government is never taking in money. They're actually affording tax credits in exchange for the charitable donations, and the courts have found that is, in and of itself, not using public monies.
And would it also, as you described the legislation, it applies to both public and private schools.
Exactly, and that was going to be my next point, and it's a perfect point, because And again, it gets back to we're not telling the donor where they have to send the money. As I had said before, a lot of in fact, the majority of the money is going to be allocated to public schools. Either the pre-kindergarten programs or the K through 12 public schools. The bill specifically calls for 50% of that money to go to public schools. So we're not actually telling the donor where they're going to send it. They could send it all to public schools as opposed to any private schools receiving any money. So that's the important part of it. And it gets a little bit more complicated in New York State because we have a thing called the Blaine Amendment, which actually restricts any public monies going to religious schools specifically. But again, this bill doesn't call for monies to be sent to religious schools. It calls for charitable donations to be sent to the education system, and that's what we want. And if I can say just real quickly, I was disappointed last week. There was an article in the New York Post which says the title of it was "A Bill to Save New York's Catholic Schools." And I think that is deceptive in what this bill's intent is. This bill is not intended to save public schools. It's intended to actually get our kids more money for their education. Whether or not public or non-public schools will benefit equally, that's up to the donors. It's not up to the crafters of the legislation or the government. But I think that's where it was deceptive in trying to make people believe that this is some type of legislation designed to help the private or religious schools. It's not.
Assemblyman, is there another just a question? You're trying to perfect the bill and make sure it's can pass muster with the courts. Is there some sort of safety measure to prevent the situation as follows? I want to send my kid to a private school. The tuition is $20,000. Well, instead of paying $20,000 tuition, what I'll do is I'll make a charitable donation to the school, and then the school will, give my kid scholarship and things like that. It's illegal now, but would it still be illegal under this proposed legislation?
Oh, absolutely, it would still be illegal.
Deacon?
I wanted to say that Assemblyman Curran is not just working on this bill. He's also the ranking member of the Ethics and Guidance Committee, and with the conviction of Eric Stevens this week, it seems you guys have your hands full.
Well, I have to, it's funny you should say that, Deacon, because before I mentioned how there was 103 bill sponsors on this bill. Well, it's down by a couple because of some of the problems with the Ethics Committee that came across some of the members. But you're right, yeah. Unfortunately, we still see in Albany people who have been given a great opportunity to represent people of their own community and violate that trust.
But Assemblyman, I think it's worse than that. I think there are a number of people who haven't been found guilty of doing anything wrong, but they're not strongly advocating for ethics reform. And then they're not behaving in a way that's exemplary. They're not doing the right thing. They don't want to show their income. They don't want to show their clients. So, again, they haven't been convicted, but they're certainly not behaving in the best possible way.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? There's strong measures that are out there that we could take right away that I've been advancing in the last 2 years. It's something as simple as making sure that if a person is convicted while serving as a member of the legislature of any crime, that they forfeit their pension right off the bat. Something simple as that is to say, hey, listen, if you're caught doing something and violating the trust of the people that put you there, that you should automatically lose your pension. You should not be entitled to that. And it's those small measures. Well,
that would increase the trust. Deacon, I want to say thank you for two reasons. One, not feeling great. You wanted to come on the air. And secondly, for recommending Assemblyman Curran. He's terrific.
He is. And just let me say one last thing, Rabbi, is that for the Catholics and people who are pro-life in general, we know it's the 41st year of Roe v. Wade. 55 million abortions have happened in the United States over those years. Brian Curran is one of the guys who stands up against that, and he had no problem voting against what the governor was pushing for late-term abortions. So Brian's not only taking care of his people in the everyday stuff, he's also a man of real moral and ethical fiber, as one of my old professors would say. So I'm proud that he represents my family.
Look,
thank you very much. That means a lot. It means more to me than you know, coming from you, those words. Thank you.
Brian, let me just say this. We in the Jewish world, there are different positions when it comes to that. However, we are very, very respectful of those who maintain a position which they feel is true to their faith. And no one should be defensive about their faith. So you stand up for what you think is right, let others stand up for what they think is right. We continue to battle it in a respectful fashion. That's the way democracy works, and I thank you for that.
And
Rabbi, thank you very much.
Assemblyman, I just want to say you're a public servant, and you sound like you're doing exactly what a public servant is supposed to be doing. I want to thank you for that.
Alan, thank you. Thank you very much
All
for
right.
taking the time. And if I can, real quickly, can I just encourage everybody to actually make sure that they contact their state representative, whether it be their assemblyman or their senator.
What bill is it now?
What's that?
What's the name of the bill?
The name of the bill is the Education Tax Credit Act. And, get your senator and assemblyman on that bill so we can get it passed.
All right.
Thank you guys very much.
And
Deacon, I hope you